Welcome, everyone. Okay, and we are recording the annual meeting now, so we can go back and reference our awesome talks. And as I just mentioned, Teresa did put a link to today's agenda, or to the conference's agenda, in the chat. But just a quick overview, this morning we'll be doing some business meeting items, including a year in retrospective, our financials, and our committee reports. Later today, we'll have some really great chats and presentations from various partners, including NRCS, OWEB, ODA, our Soil and Water Conservation Commission, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, our federal national partner, National Association of Conservation Districts, and then our Oregon Conservation Partnership. We'll have lunch, and then later this afternoon, we have some really excellent topics that we spoke to folks throughout the state about what is most relevant for us all right now. And that's what we're going to be chatting about. So we're talking about carbon sequestration, Oregon's water future, and also a couple of examples of successful projects out in the field that a couple of our districts did. So with that, I am going to start my screen share here. Excuse me. And let's do a slideshow from the beginning. Here we go. I think hopefully you can all see that. But today we are, or this year, we're celebrating 75 years, and we've been a really excellent, strong organization for all those years. And I'm really excited that we're gathering today and tomorrow to chat about the past year and reflect on our accomplishments and look ahead to the next year and future years, and also just to celebrate that we've been an active and really effective organization for so many years. So congratulations to all of us. Also, I want to thank our board members, and sometimes we forget who's where and from where they're representing. So Jeff Roley, he's our vice president. He's an at-large member, and he's from the Deschutes SWCD. Tim Newton, our secretary, he's also at-large from Malheur. Ken Bailey, our treasurer, he's from the Columbia Plateau. Oh, and I forgot to put here also, which SWCD. Jason Falsera, he's from the Portland-Salem region from Clackamas SWCD. Tom Strawn from our East region, he's from our Umatilla district. Karen Stutzman, Northwest region from Polk SWCD. Ken Maston, he's an at-large member from Klamath SWCD. Justin Farrell from the Lakeview Silver Lake SWCD, and myself, I'm the West at-large member, and I'm from West Multnomah SWCD. And you'll notice that some of these board members are staff from their SWCDs, and some of us are board members from our SWCDs. And that's a change that we made, excuse me, we made that decision a couple of years ago when we updated our bylaws. And so now we have 3 staff members on the board. And we've really found that has, in my opinion, really significantly shifted our ability as an organization to connect with what our folks need on the ground. So, these are staff that spend their full time out in the field meeting a lot of different working land folks, right? So those of us that are board members, we understand what's going on in our area of our district and on our land, but these district members, the district employees really have a much, I feel like they have a really broad perspective on what's happening. They're really tuned in to what's happening on the ground. And moreover, this is their full-time job as staff members for their district. And the rest of us are volunteers for our district. And I just really appreciate the amount of time and knowledge and skills that the staff or the staff members bring to our board. So we're all equal board members with equal voting rights and all that, but they are staff at their respective districts. And I think that that's been a really tremendous boost for our organization's capacity and reach as well. And of course, we have awesome staff. So Jan Lee, you're going to hear from Jan in a little bit, but she's our executive director extraordinaire, I like to say. Jan just brings such a breadth and depth of knowledge and experience to what we do. And whether it's, talking to legislators, meeting with all of our various agency partners, including state and federal partners, identifying funding opportunities and grants that we should go for, and then also finding ways that we can really economically advance what we're doing without bringing on new staff. And so a couple of examples of that is that we've worked with Willamette University interns. We've also had small contracts for website assistance and graphic design assistance, and even our annual meeting coordination. So we've been able to find ways to identify how we can stretch our dollars so that we have our most, I guess, challenging and sophisticated issues, Jan works on, and she's great at that. And then for the more administrative type things, we've been able to figure out how to have small contracts to accomplish that. And so I think that that's another way that as an organization, we're really taking our membership dollars and stretching those to be really an effective organization and get things done. We also have several committees and different ways that we engage with our districts. So we have our advocacy committee, and that is chaired by Stan Dean. You'll hear more about that later, as well as our working lands committee, and that's chaired by Jim Webster. And again, you'll hear more about that later. And both of those committees have really active members. So of course, we really appreciate our committee chairs, but I would be remiss if I didn't really mention and express gratitude for all of the other members of those committees and the work that they contribute to getting things done. I hope that you all are familiar with our monthly newsletters that keep everyone up to date on what has happened and what's coming up. So if you haven't been checking out those newsletters, I encourage you to. And for those of you that are on that might be in board leadership positions or staff leadership, I encourage you to share that with the rest of your board and also the rest of your staff. We have been engaged in regular webinars with the Oregon Conservation Partnership, and we take turns in who speaks and hosts those, and that's available to staff and board members of districts and watershed councils and land conservation, land trusts. And so that's a really great opportunity to brush up on current events affecting us out in the field, as well as occasionally some technical, educational type things, and a way to connect with our colleagues throughout the state. And finally, our in districts, as well as some individual members of boards and our committees are meeting. We are meeting as the state association. We're meeting with individual districts as well as our state and federal partners. And there's a whole lot of writing on this one, but I just want to also highlight that we are active working with the National Association of Conservation Districts. And I really see that as an opportunity for us to extend our impact. Last February, for the first time in many years, we presented resolutions to NACD. And what that means is that if those resolutions are passed by the board, the NACD board, which is every state and territory in the country, then they have the resources, the staff and board members that can lobby at the federal level. And that really helps us to be able to connect with and reach for funding and legislative bills that help us here in our state. So the example from last year was that we asked for support for what's called the ASAP AL program. And those are voluntary easements through NRCS. And that's really to just protect our agricultural lands by limiting non-agricultural uses and to make sure that we are allowing for legacy and moving forward and protecting those agricultural lands. So we, NACD did adopt our proposed resolutions, some of them, not in all details, but it's a negotiation. So they adopted some resolutions to advocate for more dedicated funding. And so the other result of that advocacy effort is that NACD is going to work with our federal legislators now to ensure the passage of the Charitable Conservation Easement Program Integrity Act. Just to, there have been some, I guess, nefarious uses of that, and this is to make sure that the program maintains its integrity. So just a couple of examples of how we work with NACD to make sure that we're extending our impact at the national level to make sure we get federal dollars and protections here in Oregon for our agricultural land. We sit on the legislative committee, the NACD auction committee, and then our vice president of OACD sits on the Coastal Resource Policy Group. So I just want to say thanks again for attending today and tomorrow. We have 2 days of excellent programming, and I'm really excited to celebrate 75 years. And I'm always available. My contact information is here, and I'm sure you've seen my email pop up in your inbox. So feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions or concerns, or you just want to chat. And I hope everyone enjoys the next 2 days. Thanks. Okay. And let's see, Jan, I think that you are up next, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So I am going to speak to you for just a few moments. Yesterday, I felt like I had been here since the beginning 75 years ago, but today is a much better day. As the Working Lands and the advocacy forums are both going to tell you a lot about our work in those areas tomorrow, I'm not going to center on that in my remarks. But in addition to our extensive work at the legislature and the rulemaking on the climate protection plan, we've also been following the Oregon Global Warming Commission work on sequestration on natural and working lands. And you'll hear from the chair of that group and also the legislators that are on the commission later this afternoon. I've also been active with our Oregon Conservation Partnership, the councils, districts, and land trusts. The 4 of our organizations work together, and we've been able to provide a number of deliverables to our 145 different entities. And you'll hear from our panel later this morning regarding that work in more detail. Actually, I spend quite a bit of my time in meetings, not only with federal and state agencies, but we've been having a series of meetings on sage grouse over the last couple years. And OWEB and US Fish and Wildlife, as a result, have been able to fund our districts working on sage grouse for monitoring efforts. I'm also active at OWEB meetings as our Oregon Conservation Partnership folks, and attend the SWCC meetings and have monthly updates with ODA. Recently, I was appointed to the Oregon Water Resources Commission by the governor, and I'm looking forward to taking part in how we develop our water in the future. The water vision has been moved over to WRD from OWEB. OWEB started the planning on that and made a left, and that was moved over to water so they can effectively put the pieces together and start work on that. And then the legislature, as you know, provided over $500 million to water investments, and the Water Resources Department will have a large chunk of that money to invigorate its programs. I can remember, having been around in the water policy since the 80s, that 2 years ago, the investment in water was less than in 1977. So this funding for water is going to be a big boost and will help all of us. And I'm looking forward to our new SWCD position at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. That will be someone who's going to work in the policy area and will work with all of the districts. So that hiring will take place in the next few months, and we'll be able to introduce whoever takes that position to all of you. A lot of time recently has been spent on sequestration, because between regenerative agriculture and carbon sequestration, we're going to be working at the district level to bring technical resources to our members, our landowner constituents, and others to be able to use some of these practices and potentially be able to fund some of them for the landowners. And then in my spare time, I helped to start a new Rotary chapter in Sandy. I'm on the city's planning commission and the county budget committee. So as you can see, I spend my time having lots of fun. But most of all, I really just enjoy working with all of you who make OACD an entity that can really help bring things forward and move into the future. And with that, I will move on to let you hear from our treasurer. Samantha is going to put up some financial reports.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, this is Ken Bailey, and I'm the treasurer for the organization. And I think we're in a better position we have in fairly long time. And I see Jerry Ward is on the call today. And when I first went on the board, Jerry was the treasurer, and I think it was in May or sometime in May when we had our first board meeting that I attended. And Jerry was begging for money so we could have cash to end the year. And I appreciate everything Jerry did to fight his way through those times. But with getting Jan on board and a lot of the board support, we've made some changes that we've built up now, that we're in a much better financial position to where we can much better do the job that we're really supposed to be doing. Okay, on the screen now is the balance sheet. It's really pretty simple. It's financially, this is a pretty non-complicated organization. Currently, the balance sheet is pretty simple. Like I say, is the total assets 92,727, and this is all in the checking account, and so it's available for use, and that'll of course work down through the rest of the year till June 30 as we spend a fair portion of that, and hopefully we get some other income come in to balance some of it off. The only liabilities we have is a $12,618 note from NRCS. That's a note that came about because with the sage grouse program in Eastern Oregon, originally there was a tentative agreement between OACD and NRCS Oregon that administrative fees could be taken on that program as OACD handled that program and distributed the monies out to the counties. It turned out later under federal audit that that was not allowed to have administrative fees taken out. So we owed about $25,000 back to the federal government. We've came up with an agreement with NRCS. They agreed to spread that over a couple of years period of time, paying monthly at no interest, which was hard to refuse and no interest payback. And we're now paying on a monthly basis, and we've got the balance down to the number that's in the current sheet. So bottom line, at the beginning of September, it was the liability was at the 12,618, and the opening balance equity was 77,592, which with the expenses against that, we had a net income at the end of September of 2316. So our total equity at the end of the first quarter was 80,109. So feel we're in good position to get through the end of the year and hopefully have a better balance than we had actually at end of June last year. We had about a $42,000 balance in the account. We expect that to increase actually significantly by the end of the year. And that's the balance sheet. Move on to the profit and loss statement. Income, most of it's pretty well self-explanatory.
Ken, did you want to go over the profit and loss statement first?
Yeah, this one right here, this is fine, I think. Well, wait a minute, this. No, let's go back to the other one. This one we don't need to do. This is the September one. This is just for the month of September. This is year to date, July through September. This is the one we want to present. Our annual conference had registration fees of about $1,000, and that's what it came out to. Balanced off with the budget. Executive director reimbursement. These are partnership incomes for operations. The executive director reimbursement, phone and travel, totaling $46,660 for the year. As of September 31, we had received $11,276. So that's on track, and that 46,000 something would be collected by year end, June 30. Then we have 3 grants: working lands grant, conservation story. Well, actually, and then a sequestration grant. NRCS has a conservation story. That one probably will not be received in cash this year because the NRCS got behind in some of the detail they wanted us to work on. So they put it off, and we will be doing work next spring, but probably won't have the income until next year, unless we be able to get some income this year. But most of the income will not show up until next year. So that will actually end up a reduction from budget. But those are the 3 grant categories that we're currently working with. Membership dues is the next item. We have, as of the end of September, we've received $64,821. Since then, we've received another amount to where we are currently at $82,000 and expect that to, with what we know the districts have promised, that we'll come up with somewhere near 88,000 total, which is an increase of about 12 or 13,000 from last year. You remember we made a change in how the dues were calculated and paid, and that has resulted in a positive net increase in those dues income for OACD. There will be some continuing talks on that. It was a positive direction, but there's some concern that there's some districts are interpreting the rules one way and some another, so we're not having all districts pay at the same basis that others are. And so the board is anticipating opening up and having a discussion early next spring on how we want to make sure that maybe everybody's on the same page, and some aren't paying more than they should or less than they should. So look forward to sometime next late winter, spring, having probably an online discussion, recommendations to the board for the board could come up with maybe a better plan for next year to revise the explanation on how we calculate dues. And we're looking for membership to come up with some recommendations, but the board will make the final decision and get the dues out probably late May, early June. Other income, say that members' dues, of course, is the biggest part of that. $1,000 grant processing fee was paid by NACD, to totally $76,000 in the budget. Actually, $64,860 has been received as of the end of September, and as I've noted, some more dues money has come in since that date. On the expense side, maybe scroll it up a little bit. Yeah. NACD activity has been reduced because of less travel to meetings. There's been some, and it's going to start to increase again once travel is a little more opened up. But it may or may not probably end up pretty near budget probably by the time we get to year end. And our payments to NRCS on that note that I mentioned earlier, $1,413 was paid to date, and $8,400 of the 12 is expected to be paid by the end of June, and that note will be paid off early in the following budget year. Other expenses are pretty well self-explanatory, totaling about $10,000. Personnel is the biggest expense, other than grants, pass-throughs, things. Personnel of conference registration, extra people contracted $1,000 for that has been budgeted. A couple $100 has been spent. Contracted services administration, again, a couple $300 there. We've not spent. We're encouraging Jan to maybe make use of a little more of that money to get her some help. She's spending extra hours, and she's very good at what she does, but she's almost spending too much time working for our benefit. Total personnel so far paid out at the end of September for the first quarter, about just under 20,000, which is pretty close to the budgeted amount of 86 for the year. Travel expenses, I noted, is down from what it generally is, but it's starting to open back up, and they're liable to be seeing a little more travel before the end of the year. We'll see where it ends up. But currently 184,000 is travel, and that brings our total expenses of 26,447, with the income to date of 77,136, leaving a net year-to-date income of 50,000. And got to remember that this time of year, it's early. We've just received all the dues, and we've got a lot of expenses between now and the end of the year. So we expect a fair portion of most of that may still be there at the end of the year, but never know what's going to happen between here and there. Any questions on the balance sheet or profit and loss statement? If not, I turn it back over to Jan or Terry, whoever's running the program.
I think from now we're going to move on to our committee reports, and Jim Webster is up first for Working Lands. But I also just want to give a big thank you and deep appreciation to Ken and Jan for your work on the budget and making sure that we know what we need and that we find a way to pay for it. So thank you. And Jim, you're up.
Okay, good morning. I'm Jim Webster. I'm a manager at the Union SWCD out of LeGrand, and I'm going to give you an update on the Working Lands Committee. So let me see if I can share this. So the Working Lands Committee was put together through a charter that Jan was really leading and helping us put together this charter for what we wanted to do with the Working Lands Committee. And we went to the OACD board, and as the board members know, it was approved. The charter was approved in July of 2020. And then in that charter, the direction was to promote the protection of working lands, both easements and acquisitions, by participating in programs to provide really support to districts, provide incentives, funding, education, and interactive partnerships. And I have to say that the committee really has gone beyond what this statement includes. And we have a huge thanks to give to Jan again for her shepherding of the entire process in the committee. Took us a couple of months to put together the members. We've got, I think we've got 9 members on the committee now. And they've been really active committee members, and we've met basically on a monthly schedule through beginning in January of 2021 and then through the summer. And one of the first things we did was try to put together a definition for working lands, which Oregon doesn't really have a formal accepted definition. So this was a draft definition that we put together. The working lands are managed forests, rangelands, and farms, which encompass natural habitat features such as wetlands, rivers, and coasts, and provide an abundance of natural resources for long-term agricultural, economic, and ecological benefit. This was developed and refined through a process where we put together a questionnaire that went out to all the districts, and we asked that the districts give us some input on what parts of working lands and that whole topic are important to them, how much they're involved with it, how much they want to be involved with it. And so that kind of drove us to start developing some goals and objectives. And so I've put on the screen here the overall purpose of the Working Lands Committee in this push for support to districts to promote the protection of working lands and support conservation actions and provide resources to districts so that they can promote those things, protection and conservation actions. And then the mission was to empower district members to implement these protections in their communities by participating in programs, forming partnerships with landowners and with funding entities and with other groups that are working in this realm, developing tools and resources for districts to use, facilitate and convene conversations, so really get information out to districts and to landowners and operators, identify and address barriers to the work. So we know there's barriers out there in different districts or in different locations of the state have different issues that they're dealing with. And then recommend policies and regulatory advocacy actions to the OECD board. So the outcome or the vision was to provide information and resources for impacting working lands and to protect working lands and really promote those conservation actions. Preserve working lands by active and successful project and program implementation, and then provide those tools to districts so the districts understand what things can be done, what kind of protections could be done through working lands issues. So the values the committee considered, and these values are included in the Working Lands Guidebook that Jan has spent an inordinate amount of time putting together, probably laid into the several nights. But this is kind of a short bullet list of those values that are included and the topics that are included in that guidebook. So we looked at land protection for those working lands, restoration of natural resource values, habitat protection, water quality protection and maintenance, mitigation for climate impacts, especially through regenerative agriculture and then carbon sequestration type projects, and then protecting contiguous land and landscape fragmentation, improving soil health, and then looking at providing economic value and job creation through working lands. And so the two products that the committee has been working on over the last years to develop this working lands guidebook that Jan will describe tomorrow in our morning forum, and then the actual morning forum that will happen tomorrow morning. And so just to run through what that forum will be, tomorrow morning at 8:30, we'll start off. We've got a rundown of some really good speakers. We'll start with a topic of trends in land use by Jim Johnson with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And then we have three people who are working for land trusts or conservation entities that include Genevieve Perdue from Blue Mountain Land Trust out of Walla Walla and works in Northeast Oregon and Southeast Washington. Kelly Warren, who's a regional biologist with Ducks Unlimited, and he's going to be talking about their national and then state approach to conservation easements and more regional federal grant applications to protecting working lands and completing conservation projects. And then Nellie McAdams with the Oregon Agricultural Land Trust. And then we also have three people from three different Oregon SWCDs that will be talking about their programs and how they're involved in working land type projects from East Multnomah, Yamhill, and Clackamas. And then finally, Jan will run through the guidebook that was just completed and talk about what kind of tools are in that and what where that guidebook could be used in the future. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Jan or Terry.
Thanks, Jim. That was really awesome. And let's see, let me get my, there we go. And our Working Lands Committee, like Jim explained, has just been doing so much. And Jan put in a lot of her time and sweat equity into assembling our guide, our workbook now. So that should be a very valuable, tangible tool for all of us to use throughout the state. Does anyone have any questions about our Working Lands Committee for Jim or anyone else? All right, well, hearing none, we are going to move on to our Advocacy Committee update with Stan Dean. I see Stan is ready to go. So Stan, I don't know if you have something that you're sharing, but I'll let you guys take care of that. Okay.
Actually, I don't have any. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint here today. I'll have many PowerPoints later tomorrow for everybody to get into. So I just have a brief update here, largely because much of what we're focusing on the Advocacy Committee is scattered throughout this two-day agenda, and I don't want to be too redundant with everything here. I'll start off with a brief update on the committee. Overall, I think the committee is functioning very well. We meet the third Friday of each month, and we've got some pretty good attendance at the meeting. We probably have about 7 regulars at these meetings, and we usually have 5 or 6 at any individual meeting. The roster for the committee goes a bit further. We have 14 people on the roster, and I think some of them are just getting the information to track what's going on. I would like to say that we're always open to new additions. It's a lot of good work we do, and things are going smoothly, but please, anybody who's interested, we're welcoming newcomers. Another thing I'm going to mention is our position statements. These are basically statements of what we believe in as OACD. They were adopted by the board in January 2020, and they're a very important tool for the advocacy committee. They really serve as a benchmark for what we can and can't say in the various forums we get into. I think they've been very successful at guiding us so far, but like anything else, there's time to update them. And for anybody who sticks around to the very end of this conference, the last thing we're going to do is kind of run through these position statements and tee off an update of the position statements that'll continue through the winter here with that process of dealing with them. The next thing I'm going to mention is a model advocacy policy. We did prepare one, which was intended to be adopted by SWCDs so that they can become nimble in their advocacy efforts. It really has a lot of the do's and don'ts with political campaigning, with lobbying, and with other forms of advocacies. Last year, we championed this policy in several different webinars in the fall and early winter. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of interest in adopting it. Some districts have been efficient at advocacy, and they have their own protocols in place and can do it and can act nimbly. For example, when we need a comment letter, they can crank it out without having to wait to the next board meeting to decide on be able to do that. But still, many of our SWCDs, I believe, are not able to be responsive very quickly when we need that to happen. And I do think that the model advocacy policy is something I'd like to see a little more attention given to and getting that implemented throughout the state. We did receive some feedback that the model was very long and a bit cumbersome. So we have recently reformatted it to make it a little simpler for folks to implement. Moving on, the 2021 legislative session, we did a tremendous amount of work given the resources available to us. During the session, we stepped up our monthly meetings from once a month to every single Friday because things move so quickly to keep track of everything. And I'm going to have to jump on the bandwagon with being a big Jan supporter here. She is absolutely an amazing resource in the legislative forums, and we are so fortunate to have her. We tracked many bills, and we provided quite a bit of written testimony and verbal testimony at committee hearings. Jan will give a more detailed report on that tomorrow. I'm going to mention just a few of the primary areas that we're focusing on as an advocacy committee. One of those, again, peppered throughout this two-day conference, is climate, with an emphasis on sequestration in natural and working lands. One of the big things we participate in was Department of Environmental Quality's Climate Protection Program. Jan was on the Rules Advisory Committee. I was an alternate and sat in and actively participated along with her. We were not successful in getting sequestration in natural working lands into this program. But through our efforts, we definitely got a lot of attention to the need for sequestration to a lot of people who will be able to influence where we go in the future in the state. So I think it was very helpful in setting the stage for future actions. We also rallied a good number of letters of advocacy on sequestration, getting it into the climate protection program from individual SWCDs. And I was really happy that we were able to do that. We also spent quite a bit of time tracking the Oregon Global Warming Commission Natural and Working Lands proposal, which you'll hear about later in this conference. We continue to focus on Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program and work with partners to get this program funded. We're also trying to help out with a work group who's trying to resurrect wildlife habitat conservation management program. Basically, it's a tax incentive for having for having wildlife habitat plant management plans and restrictions on your land. And we think it's a very good program that's on the books but not funded, and we're trying to get that started again. In the legislative session, we spent a lot of time tracking wildfire, particularly Senate Bill 762, which was the wildfire omnibus bill. And you're going to hear more about that tomorrow. And a couple of things in our future is the Oregon water future. This was the Oregon Water Vision when it was at OWEB. Now it's moving over to Water Resources Department. It was slowed down for a little bit in the last year, but it's going to get resurrected, and we'll pay a lot of attention to that. And also the Water Resources Department, every 5 years, they have to update their integrated water resources strategy. And it's time for that update. And they're going to be going through that process starting this next year. So we'll pay much attention to that. The last thing I'll mention is I want to highlight tomorrow. We do have 2 legislators that are going to be speaking at lunchtime tomorrow. Representative Pam Marsh and Senator Jeff Golden. And I think it'll be fun to listen to them and see what they have to say on natural resources. And at that, I'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Dan. That was a lot of information there packed in. We really appreciate that. I see that there's been some questions in the chat. Do we want to share that with the rest of the group here as part of our Q&A?
Sure, I could just refer to those and then we could open it up for other questions to be added to chat. One was a question about the prior year's finances, and I mentioned that we would post it in the member section. It was a very complicated report because of all of the grants for sage grouse, but you'll be able to see that, and we won't take the time today to go through that. And another one was sequestration and how that was dealt with DEQ. The DEQ director decided that their program would only deal with reductions in emissions, and therefore they were not supportive of adding sequestration into it, which is something other than a reduction. But other legislators and the Oregon Global Warming Commission are supportive of sequestration. We'll just move forward with it in a different way. And actually, the Environmental Quality Commission will be voting on the rules for the climate protection plan at the end of December, but we're not feeling that there's going to be a movement on the sequestration part of that program. So that's the 2 questions that were in chat. And if we have some others, we can deal with those.
And Jan, I just want to confirm that will the presentations made today and tomorrow be available to people who have registered?
Yes, registrants will be able to review the recordings, and we'll send out the links so that they can access those and place them in the members section of the website.
Thanks. So we do have a few minutes now if anyone has questions for this business meeting portion.
I'll go first. And Jan, with regard to sequestration, is that something that the that we could look at in terms of developing legislation? Because I don't think the regulators are going to act on that individually. I know that sequestration is a large part of other states' efforts to reduce carbon influences, and we don't want to make it just a benefit for doing business as usual, but we do see the potential of sequestration as a real tool in reducing our carbon footprint.
Yes, and this afternoon you'll hear from the Global Warming Commission and the legislators that are part of that commission who will be able to identify some steps forward. This is something that the agencies will need to be funded to support the program with. And also there is discussion of grants that will be available for people to do sequestration. So I'll let those folks talk about what's going to happen in the future. So I think that we will definitely have a lot of work to do in the future on that topic.
Jan, I'll just chime in also on Jeff's question here too. In that, in the DEQ process where we didn't get sequestration in, it was quite disappointing because there's a huge amount of money potentially that's going to be going to community climate investments, a very important part of that program there. And we wanted to have access to that money for sequestration. And that's why it was so disappointing. Your question on legislative fix. Yeah, it is possible to make a legislative fix to fold that into the program in the future to make it happen. But I think it's a little premature to say whether we're going to need to or want to go down to that direction, particularly because there's the Oregon Global Warming Commission report has such good information into it. I think we're going to want to focus on seeing how that gets implemented and what opportunities roll out of that.
And also Ron Alvarado may want to speak to us a little bit about that in his remarks, because there's federal money coming down the chain that will help in that area.
Other questions or comments about this or other things that you heard this morning so far? Oh,
Claire.
Claire. Mhm.
Claire has his hand up.
Yeah, just a comment for everyone. Do keep a thought out for small farms and how they can, and small acreages, whether it be forest or farms, during the next 2 days, and how they can contribute. Because in these cases, not only to sequestration, but also to wildlife habitat, where there are long connective corridors or critical habitat areas. And it's something that I've advocated for a long time, and we seem to overlook when when programs are being put together and actually implemented. So thank you. Look forward to the next 2 days.
Anyone else with any questions? I'm looking to see if anyone has their hand raised on here, and I don't see that. But feel free to speak up if you have something.
Well, I guess we'll just have a longer break then.
Okay, well, we are going to reconvene right at 9:45. So I recommend that you just stay on, maybe mute yourself. You can stop your video, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes. Thank you.